Hello, podcast listeners. Before you get ready for those holiday parties, or maybe you're going out to somewhere fancy, you want to listen to this episode of JJ Meets World because we start off by talking about venues and then have some real cringe-worthy moments that Tucker and I have had on stage, all in good fun. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
I've been to a lot of venues in my day. And when I say venues, I mean a place where something is planned to happen, whether it be a big performance, a small performance. Sometimes the space, the four walls, ceiling, and floor aren't meant to be a performance space, but they turn it into something. And I want to talk about a couple of the things I've seen over the years that I really enjoy the most, because I'm feeling a little nostalgic for Linebender shows right now. We've got a very limited series this fall or this winter, excuse me. And it's mainly because I don't know what the future of this thing is. I really like having my weekends off, and the gigs that we do have, I gave them such an insane proposal that when they said yes, there's no way I can justify not going and doing that show, which is good, right? So over the years, Linebenders has toured around the country, and we've performed everywhere from in the area where they would load missiles onto planes on the USS Lexington, all the way down to, Maddock, North Dakota, in their community room, where they also were going to put cots out so that we could sleep there that night. So I feel like I've seen just about everything. And here's a couple of highlights from the years of performing. Now, number one, if you are someone who's in charge of a venue, here are some things that you need to know right at the very beginning. Bring somebody in who understands sound. And when I say understand sound, I don't mean amplification. I mean understand sound. So if you're remodeling the American Legion in your hometown and you're like, oh, listen, we're going to have bands, but we also want to have presentations and we want this to be available for company parties, so we're going to put in a sound system. Hire a company that knows what they're doing. It'll cost you a little bit more, but ultimately it's going to save you a lot of headaches. Because I've been to a lot of places where they're like, oh, yeah, we've got sound. And what they do is they've got 2 giant 5-foot tall speakers that they use when the local band comes and just, blares their music on nights when they have live music. But that's not conducive to somebody who's trying to give a presentation. And I'm not talking about it's too much sound. It's a different type of sound, right? Like, it's things that have woofers built into them, things that are meant to be more for amplification when it comes to drums, is different than when you're using something for live voice, and vice versa. If you have a space that is perfectly set up for someone giving a speech, it's not going to be instantly conducive to a band. Now, here's most bands tour with their own sound equipment. And that's incredibly smart, right? Because you want the right sound. You want to be able to control what you've got. You don't want to talk to a venue and they're like, yeah, we got a sound system. And you show up and they've got a little tiny amp that they
you
use.
Want consistency, just like a restaurant wants consistency. You want a consistent product put out.
Right. And so it is a good idea that most bands, and we with Linebenders started touring with a basic system. That's fine. And the problem is that whenever I bring the basic system, I have to charge the venue or the client more. It's just, I'm adding one more piece to the puzzle. It's one more thing I got to worry about. If it goes down, I've got to rent something at the last minute. So knowing what good sound is great. And so here's one of the things I've noticed over the years. The more you can essentially like quadrant off areas, the better. So for example, if you can play music only in the back and then have like the area up front not have music or vice versa, that's great. So if you can select zones, that is a great sound system. And that can be as simple as having 3 sliders on a board that says front, middle, and back. And so that you can control that. So if you don't want it as loud in the back, you don't have to have it as loud in the back. This is something I always tell people. So when I'm performing, I figure I am good for 150 people deep, meaning that if you have 150 people in a banquet room, and let's say the tabletops are 8 and you've got 5 tabletops in a row, I am good for 7 rows, probably at the very most. And then beyond that, I'm going to need some kind of sound, right? I'm going to have to be mic'd up. Now, here's the problem, though. As a performer who's used to performing for that type of group, if I'm at like the 200 mark, I'm loud enough to fill that beginning space. I'm just not loud enough to fill that end space, but I can't tone it. I have a hard time toning it back, right? So I have a hard time going from, hey, everyone, it's a great show, to, hey, everyone, it's a great show, knowing that I'm being amplified. So if I've got the ability, I will put my speaker system way, way back. So starting at least like 3/4 of the way back, so that my amplification is being handled for everyone in front just by my projection. And then it just gives me that little boost to get it back. Also, a divider wall that you can pull along a track is not a divider wall. I have done shows.
It may block eyesight a little bit, but
and that's it. That is it. So I've done shows where we've been right next to a wedding and the wedding DJ is set up there. It's impossible. I'm never going to be able to shout loud enough so that I can drown out the chicken dance. And I feel for the wedding DJ, right? Like they've been hired to do what they're supposed to do. Also, I've had situations where because
how do you DJ quietly?
Right, you can't. You absolutely
It's
can't.
not possible.
And if I'm supposed to be performing from 8:30 to 9:30, that's prime dancing time at a wedding.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've done things like this where when we show up early, and let's say their dinner goes from like 6 to 7, and then they're having an awards banquet from 7 to 8. We're going to go on at 8:30, and I see that there's a wedding next door. I always tell them this, hey, let me go on right after dinner. I mean, as they're clearing dessert plates, let us go on. I know that's earlier than you want. You can do your awards later, but your awards you can do with sound bleeding in. I cannot do the show and have people be entertained. And it's just out of my control. It's amazing how many clients don't accept that and they get mad at you for it. So a dividing wall is not a wall. And I understand, right? You've got a huge space. You want to be able to like chalk it into 2 because you can get double the rental for that, but you're hurting both sides of this operation. Also, I've been doing shows. There's a place in Fargo, and it's an inn that you go when you want to go on holiday. And they have had issues where I've been performing in one room, and then all of a sudden, my niece Jocelyn was the cutest little girl I've ever seen. and and then you hear like, hello, hello, and then bonk, 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 bonk. Hello, hello. Can anyone hear me? I don't think this is working. Oh, Jocelyn. And then clearly they had routed the microphone into this other room. And so we were getting all of Uncle Al's speech, and there they couldn't hear it. And occasionally it'll be like, this fucking thing won't work. And then you go like, oh my God, I'm performing for a youth group. This is the worst. There's so much that I can't control that when a person asks me for a quote, my 3 questions are this. Please give me a run through of what your evening will be. And, cocktail hour, what you're going to eat. Is it buffet style? Is it served? If you're going to do awards, if you're going to have a speech from anyone, when you want us to go on, will there be an open bar or a cash bar? Because if it's an open bar, I like to go earlier rather than later so that people aren't too drunk. And So that's question number one. Give me the run through of your evening. Number two, the approximate number of attendees. Now, this is something I think that's always interesting. Nobody is ever right in their approximate. It is one way or the other. So they say like, well, we have 100 employees and they're allowed to bring spouses. So we're thinking 200 people and then 40 show up. Or they say like, oh, well, we're going to open this up to clients and vendors, but we only think that 40 people are going to show up and then 200 are there. Right. But an approximate idea is what I need to start with when it comes to that. And then lastly, venue. And we have some people say, oh, we're going to use a space in town. We've used it before. They have everything you need. And I'm like, well, they might not have everything I need. You know, this is another thing too, is if you rent someplace that's attached to a bar, so take like an American Legion, and they're going to keep the bar open that night, you have to know that there's going to be the regular winos that are at that bar, and maybe they want to watch the Wild hockey game and turn it up really loud, or someone's going to go over to the jukebox and be like, I'm feeling like Rod Stewart tonight.
And I like how you referring to them as regular winos would infer that there are irregular winos.
Oh yeah, the irregular winos are usually drifters.
Irregular winos sounds like
a band name. A great band name.
It sounds like a band name, but it's only like boomer guys who are like old farts.
Yeah, right.
You know, old fart music, like Tuckered Out.
Yeah, exactly right. Or they're like, oh, I don't like this modern day music. Give me something that's got a steel guitar in it. That's
Hello,
what music
we are the Irregular Winos, and you can see us at the Valley City Renaissance Fair this Wednesday.
We're the Regular Winos. Sorry, there will be no drums tonight. Our drummer Leroy got a DUI on the way to the show tonight. If anyone plays drums, we'd really love to talk to you. Just real quick.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I might do some juggling tonight, and I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
I really think that's going to come back.
All right, here we go.
And,
1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah, but like that's also a problem too, is that knowing what the venue has and doesn't have. I don't mind bringing a stage. I don't mind bringing the sound system. I want the show to be as good as possible for the client. And most of these people are not professional event planners. You know, they are, they're the secretary who got asked to do this, or they are the vice president who this is one of their job duties and she's in the woods just trying to do it. And so I think of myself as a resource in helping people walk through a bunch of these things. So some of my favorite venues that I've ever performed at are the following. In Minot, North Dakota, it used to be a Holiday Inn, but now it's, I think, called like a Cambria Inn and Suites. But they've got this little tiny off to the side press room that's sort of a long rectangle. It's not super wide. It's more skinny. They put the stage right at the front. So it's nice because no one walks out. No one has the ability to like be like, this is bull. I'm getting out of here, which I appreciate. Number two, it's just the ceilings are low enough, but the area where you perform, it kind of like it gets higher right there, and there's a chandelier. So it's got a really good stage picture up there. And this is going to sound weird, but they've got these fake plants that line like fake like trees and big bushes and stuff like that kind of line the outer walls. And I love working those into scenes. So like I'll go and grab 3 of them and make the scene about 2 guys hunting. And like it's just it's a prop that you can use, and it's a warm, welcoming place. I also love because when we go perform there, we also book rooms there. So all I've got to do is walk downstairs and check out the venue when we check in. I come back later to talk to the client and make sure everything's good to go. And then really we can wander around, and there's a ground round attached to the hotel. So after we do the show, we can go eat, and we never have to actually leave. That is a little slice of heaven. It's what it must be like to perform on a cruise ship. Real nice stuff there. Another venue that I would like to call out for its crappiness would be the former Downtown Fargo VFW or American Legion. It's
so should we call this, is this episode like places you'd love to work for again, or is this places you never want to work for again?
It's a little bit of both, right? Like places I've been.
Should we take this podcast episode and send it to any of your prospective clients? Like, hey, you want to be onboarded by what we are about? Here, just listen to this 45 minutes.
Well, I think part of it is like most of the time, this has nothing to do with the actual client themselves, right? Like,
sure.
This has to do with the venue that the client chose. I will also say this. A couple of times clients have been thrifty with what they're doing, which is not a bad idea. And they've said, oh, you're going to perform at our production plan. So like the place that makes Lund boats, they had a Halloween party and we performed in the area where they form the aluminum into a boat.
Okay.
And they did a combo because it was their party, and then there was another factory down the street that makes fake or like gas fireplaces, and so they came over too, so that they could all share in the cost, and that was horrific. Not only was the show itself doomed from the beginning because we were following a group called the Kroomkaka Sisters. And it was 3 older ladies who sang covers of 50 songs, but made them like very Norwegian. And they all wore leopard, and they didn't actually sing. Everything was pre-recorded, so they kind of like lip sync to it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And honest to God, I looked at it and I remember looking at your dad being like, how are we going to follow this? Like, and so, like they're saying they're like, instead of like, I love that old time rock and roll, it's I love that old time caramel roll.
It feels like it should play out as the scene in the movie when the next band goes on and everyone's booing them, and the people from the audience start asking for the previous band, like bring back the Kroomkaka Sisters.
Yeah, well, and after the show, they were packing up, and they're telling us about how like, hey, there's not a like an Elks Club between here and the Twin Cities that the Kroomkaka Sisters haven't brought to the floor. And I was like, yeah, I believe that. Okay, ladies.
How much fucking road strange do you think those ladies pick up when they're touring?
Okay, these women are easily 65. I mean, this is something
but in their age range.
A lot.
Yeah.
Like, I think that they probably killed a lot of their partners because they didn't take a heart pill.
I bet they're just exotic enough because they're performers that some dude's like, oh, you know what? I think we've made a connection.
And they wear leopard print
Arby's,
and they wore sunglasses inside, which was pretty daring. Sunglasses inside, but so we follow the Kroomkaka Sisters. And we're in an area that is meant for like giant machinery. The sound is awful. And the worst part about it is at one point during the show, I played a guy who, for whatever reason, in some scene was hungry. And a guy who was dressed up like a hockey player got out of his seat, went to the buffet, grabbed like a wheat bun and came and shoved it in my mouth. But he's wearing a hockey glove, so he splits my lip. And so I end up like bleeding the rest of the show and like essentially like doing scenes and drinking my own blood. And everyone thought it was so funny. They're like, you got roughed up by the hockey guy. Oh, it's so funny. That was a horrible place to perform. Fun crowd of people, but that was a horrible venue. Versus there's like a furniture supply store in the Fargo area that we performed for them. And it was great because they had this huge showroom and all they did was push all their stuff off to the side. And they had a second story. So like all the offices were up on this kind of balcony space. And so they could sit on the balcony or they could sit on the main floor in front of us. That was a really neat like setup for using your own space for it. I've also been to places where, for example, I was doing a show for 3M and they had booked a pretty sizable country band who was going to perform after we were done. and the country band insisted on this stage that was like 30 feet by 40 feet, right? So a big dance floor in front of them. Well, they put us on the same stage. So at the bare minimum, I am 40 feet away from the closest audience member. You do
Okay.
not form any kind of a connection with someone when you're 40 feet away.
Yeah. Yeah, that's way too far.
And what's nice is if there were people between, like if there was a full crowd between me and that 40 feet, no problem, right? Because I'm connecting with those people up closer, and that energy shifts itself all the way back so that, you know, people who are sitting in the back get involved with it. It is just insane to me how people don't understand when I tell them, I'm like, this is going to be bad if we can't figure out a solution. Help me figure out a solution. And again, I don't blame the people who are setting up the show, but I do think that they should listen to my expertise. I would never have a plumber come to my house and have them be like, hey, listen, you need a new U-bend on this sink. And I'm like, you know, actually, I was thinking that what we need is a new faucet. I would never do that. I would think it, but I'd never say it out loud. And I get that a lot with people when we're dealing with venues where they think they know what's going on. Also, never hire a niece or a nephew. Never. Just don't do it. So many people at these venues. So like people who bought a bar and they're like, oh yeah, my niece was in theater, so she set up the whole sound system. I'm like, oh great, I can't wait to see how crappy this is. It amazes me how like some people will beg me. Like there's an Eagles club that's about 60 miles to the west of my current location that has begged me to come out there. And so when we finally go out there, they're like, oh, well, but we're not gonna turn off, you know, we're not gonna turn off this like football game. And I was like, oh, are there a lot of like Syracuse fans here? And they're like, no, but people come to watch the game. So, well, then why did you book entertainment for tonight? That doesn't make sense. And they're like, oh, and also like we're only going to have the bar upstairs open. So if people want to drink, they're going to have to get up and come upstairs. Well, that doesn't make sense either. Like you want someone down there, I'm telling you, you can make more money by having a beer bath downstairs so that people don't have to get up and go upstairs. Also, if someone gets up and goes upstairs and then they come down 25 minutes later and then they're like, this show sucks, be like, dude, you haven't seen this show. You don't even know what you're talking about.
Was there ever a location where you went into it thinking this is really going to fucking suck, this location and everything, and then it ended up being fantastic?
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you, I can think of it right off the top of my head. We went to a place that manufactured RVs. So the frame of an RV. Mm-hmm. And they were having a company picnic, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be just horrific, because they're like, oh, we've got a flatbed trailer for you to perform on. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever, because they want us to be outside. So anytime you add outside as it, like, you know, you did Shakespeare outside. You know, that there are just a million elements that can ruin an outdoor show. And I'm not just talking about the environment. I'm talking about
not just weather. I mean, oftentimes people will just walk up and then they'll begin to urinate themselves.
Right, sure.
That happened. That 100% happened. It was like, I want to say it was when we were doing Romeo and Juliet, and it was rehearsals, and a guy who had been having a couple of drinks, and he walked up, and he wasn't interfering at all. He was standing off to the side.
Yeah.
He was trying to talk to some of the actors who were off stage, you know, but wasn't being mean or aggressive or anything, but was clearly intoxicated. And then just started going to the bathroom right there. And we were like, oh, whoa, okay, well, and then, called the local police, and I think he was probably found. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. I also, using specifically Shakespeare in the Park in Fargo, in Island Park, there's this little, half amphitheater space or whatever where you can sit. And it's kind of neat because it does sort of evoke a bit of what we kind of see old Greek theater being like, right? Where it's just like a rocky terrain where people sit on, and then there's just a flat surface, and that's it, right? But it's part of a park that has all sorts of other things going on in it, including right behind it, there are tennis courts and basketball courts. And one time we were doing Macbeth and we're doing a scene, and this dude walks onto one of the basketball courts and is like playing basketball by himself and like doesn't realize a play is going on, and then realizes what's going on and turns around and just stands there and stares on it at the play, and then gets on his cell phone and loudly starts going, yeah, hey, yeah, I don't know, there's like a play going on, and starts talking about the play louder than the people who are in the play are doing the play. So that kind of shit happens all the time outdoors.
I was making a movie for like a project, like a school project, and we were filming at this little mini mart, and this guy walks out and he sees that there's like 4 kids and like a camera, and clearly we were setting up to do something, and we were taping, and he goes, "Don't mind me, I'm on garbage detail." And I immediately lose it, and we're like, we gotta put that in the movie. We just gotta leave that in there. The place I was doing RVs, by the way, so we're set to go on at like 8:30 that night, and so the sun is just setting, and they walk me over to the area. Like, they have a games area and they've got food, and so they walk me over to the area where we're gonna do the show. And it's not just a flatbed trailer; it's a flatbed trailer that's got like 3/4 of an RV done, like the shell of it. So you get like 2 sidewalls and a full back. It's on this trailer, so it's lifted up, and then there's cafe lighting going back and forth from the building to this. So it was easily the most beautiful venue I've ever seen. So we can see the setting sun behind the crowd, and they are getting this kind of twilight lit experience. And because it was between the building and this thing, it formed like a little amphitheater. It was beautiful. In fact, I remember telling them later on that this was one of like the most beautiful shows I've ever done. And that was one where they were like, we got off stage and they were like, hey, could we pay you guys to do another like half hour? Like, that was so awesome. Like, come, all the drinks are on us. Like, stick around. Like, oh man, that was so good. There's no way you guys planned that. You planned it. You had to have planned it. You're like, no, we didn't. That was awesome. Thank you very much. Good night.
Yeah. Magical live theater.
We also did a show in St. George, Utah, that a friend of ours was supposed to be promoting for like 3 weeks. And then we get down there, and I remember I had designed a poster. I had printed them in Fargo and then shipped them to St. George. And when we got inside his parents' house where we were staying, there was the FedEx thing, not even opened. And I remember being like, hey, what have you done to promote the show? And he's like, oh, well, God. There's just no places that let you hang posters. So then I'm like, okay. So,
are there no walls here?
Right. And I was like, okay. And he's like, people in this town have got a weird thing about like letting someone like hang a poster for a show. So we start driving around, and the first thing is like, so previous guest Jason Jacobson came up with this brilliant idea, and he grabbed a laptop and he designed a flyer that said, throw this piece of paper away. Wait, do we have your, and then like in smaller text, like, do we have your attention? And it was like the details for the show, right? So we decided, listen, we're going to go over to a Staples. We're going to get this thing Xeroxed on multicolored paper. We'll cut them in half, and then we'll walk around handing them out and stuff like that. So we go and we split up into teams, and we're all over town handing these things out. We hand out probably 500 of them that day. By the way, passing by building after building, business after business, with tons of posters hanging in there. Posters for, it's the Rose Festival this weekend, or this band is performing here. And I remember thinking,
you don't understand, because they're just so sensitive about how they have too many posters.
Oh, that's what it was. He just didn't get there in time.
Yeah.
My poster was too flashy because I had a picture of Groucho glasses on it. Oh, God, what are you going to do? So we do the show, and like, okay, so we were at Jazzy J's Coffee House. That's the name of the place we were going to perform, Jazzy J's. So when we get there, they had put Bender's. They said like tonight, Bender's comedy. And I was like, oh God, you might as well have not even bothered on your little marquee there, guys. So we get in, and it's one of those businesses where you walk in, and on the left side, it's a coffee shop, and on the right side, it's a venue. And there's just like a wall that runs straight down the middle of this place, right?
Mhm.
So we're performing on the right side. The only people who show up for our first show, we're doing 2 nights worth of shows. The only people who show up is the woman at Staples who helped us make the flyers, and she brought her whole family.
Aw.
So we pretty much did a show privately for this family. And you know what? It was a great show. It was a ton of fun. Some of the best shows I've ever done are when the crowds are so small, because it becomes
Oh yeah.
ultra specific and ultra intimate, which I always like.
Yeah. At one point, me and some friends had our own theater company a long time ago, and we put up a version of complete works of William Shakespeare abridged. And before we did it at FMCT in town here, we did it in this little town. What was it called? Lemoore, I think.
Sure.
And because Matt Burkholder had a connection there, he had, I think, directed something out there at the little playhouse they had there. So we went out to do that there. I think, God, did we do 2 weekends out there just to work on the show, basically, but to have like an audience. So we thought, well, if anyone comes to the show, we've got some test audience members and stuff. And we thought, we would get like 20 people, maybe, right? Maybe 30 people. And we didn't. We got much less than that. But one night, I think this was the first weekend we were there, no one was there. No one showed up to come see the show. And we're like, oh, okay. Well, I guess, guys, we have the night off, and we're about to shut it down for the night. Like we're in costume and stuff, but no one is showing up. Well, then this woman shows up with her 2 daughters, and we had already decided to cancel the show because we thought, well, no one's going to come. And she goes, oh, we actually drove in from out of town to watch this, like an hour away. And we're like, oh, well, you deserve to see it then, right? Like you went the distance. Let's do it. Let's do it for you and your daughters. And so we had an audience of 3 people, and it was delightful. I mean, they were really sweet people, and they had a great time, and we had a great time, right? And it went to show that, yes, obviously from a selling ticket standpoint, you would love to have the house be full, but you can still have a really magical experience with the smallest of audiences. I mean, even when you're working on a show that is going to have an audience, but you have those first couple of rehearsals where people in the production company that's putting it on will attend and watch, right? And you get kind of some feedback from them as they, laugh or react to the scenes you've been working on. Even those performances, because those are performances, they're just not public ones. Those are also a ton of, they can be really meaningful, can't they?
Oh, I think that they are. And, in a weird way, it takes you back to a way more basic time. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
You now are performing solely for these few people. You're making a direct connection, and you realize like, oh, I'm not doing this because I need to sell out every house. I'm doing this because I want to bring joy or entertainment to one person. And you accomplish that goal by the end of it.
This is going to sound like a non sequitur, but I promise you it's connected. Have you read any of the books in the Dune series?
I have not Dune that yet.
You've not Dune that yet. You've seen like the first, like the movies?
I've seen all the Dune movies and everything like that. Yeah.
So the movies kind of touch on it a little bit, but they don't really do that great of a job. If you've read the books, which I just finished the 6th and final book by Frank Herbert before he died. Anyways, there's this concept in the books of all these characters having these sort of like eons of genetic memories locked in their DNA. And they take it to the point of, you're a being living in whatever era on whatever planet. And if you've been able to unlock access to it, you can unlock access to memories of predecessors and the things that they did that are in your DNA.
Okay.
Right. And so it takes it to like an extreme thing, but it's based off of really an actual concept, which is that there's some form of, genetic memory. I mean, that's what it is to sort of pass on genes in the first place, right? Well, I bet deep down in our genetic memory, we have some semblance of a memory of our ancestors sitting around a fire at night in a cave telling a story of the hunt they did that day. And they're getting up and they're doing the motions, right? And making sounds like that might make one of their children laugh, right? Or might make them get scared. And they'll find creative ways to help illustrate the story they're trying to communicate. And that was how it started, right? That's what that is. And that you're not, when you're doing that in front of a large audience, it's its own vibe, and it's incredible and it's really powerful. But when you have those moments where, it's night, you're all kind of huddled together in this closed, dark place. This family has just come in out from the cold after an hour drive, and you're going to perform for them. It feels very, very similar. Like, we're just a few people around here, and this is how we are passing the time tonight, right? There's no radio, there's no music to listen to. There's music might not even be invented yet, right? There's, fire is probably a new thing-ish, and people are gathering around the campfire and talking and performing in some way. That's where it started. And so I think those moments where you have a tiny audience, maybe that unlocks a little bit of your genetic memory.
Sure, I can totally buy that. 100% can I get behind that. Do you can you remember a show that you did at one point where everything seemed to be going wrong at all? Like, where just nothing seemed to be going right, and
yeah,
and it's kind of locked in your brain. I've got two prime examples. Number one is when I was in high school, my drama teacher, Mrs. Stark, did not direct the 3-act play every year. That was done by an English teacher named Lee Meister, who used to run the theater program, but now only taught English. And he directed a show called The Merry Murders at Montmarie. And it was a kind of whodunit murder mystery. And it's all set in this secluded cabin in northern New York. And a bunch of people are there to pitch a new Broadway show. But one of them, like this creative team, whenever they get together, somebody ends up getting murdered. So they know one of these people is like the villain and is killing everyone, right? Mm-hmm. And so one person's a secret FBI agent and one guy is an actor trying to get his career started and yada, yada, yada. At that point, they're like, the set's going to be built by the sophomores who are taking performing arts in Performing Arts 1, and they're taking a technical theater course. This class did not give a shit about like making these things. So and I remember being like, there's a lot that goes on. Like, there are trap doors. There's all this stuff that's supposed to happen. So the night, the opening night, until they opened the doors for people to come through, we were still painting parts of the set. Like, literally until they're like, all right, we got to open, the show's in 15 minutes, and be like, okay. And we're just like painting the set. So I remember at one point touching something and a bunch of brown paint came off on my hand. And during the show, there was like a Scooby-Doo thing where I'm running through one door and slamming it and going through another and slamming it. I go through and I slam this door and a giant piece of the set falls off and it's supposed to look like artwork that's hung on the wall. And I mean, it's giant. And so I grab it and I take it with me to and I pretend like I'm supposed to be protected by it. And the next day, I remember somebody saw the show and they're like, did the painting not fall right this time? And I said, what? And they're like, yeah, that painting that fell, like, it didn't fall tonight. Why, was there something wrong? Did something go wrong? I was like, no, it went wrong last night, not tonight. It went wrong last night. That was the bad thing. And then, that was just nothing could go right in that one. That was awful. And then I did an improv show at an old folks home once where it was just Natalie Deutsch and I, and we play a game called Arm Expert, where someone comes behind me and puts their arm through the holes where my elbows are, and they do all the hand motions for me in the scene. So if I'm talking about something being good, hopefully they do a thumbs up. Or if they start, if I'm like, hey, let's make these meatballs, and then they look like they're rolling, I'm like, these are pie meatballs. You roll it out like dough. Natalie goes and picks the woman who's going to be my arms. And I hear her talking to her in the back of this. It's a big room at an old folks home. And so this woman comes up and she's only got one arm. And she's a sweet little old lady. And she goes, I volunteered before I knew what I was supposed to be doing. And I'm like, don't worry, we'll make this work. And so she put her one arm through. And the thing is, like, she's little and old, right? So her arm barely gets out beyond my tummy. And so it looks like I've got a hand that's growing out of my navel for the most part. And that was one where I'm like, can nothing go right for me on this show? Like, can nothing go right? And then, like, I remember, like, we did someone else and I'm like, oh, can I get your favorite movie? And they named something, you know, like from the 40s. And so I start doing it. And they're like, that doesn't happen in the movie. I'm like, no, that was just a suggestion. But that doesn't, Cary Grant never said that. I remember going like, come on, guys. It was probably the longest hour of my life. And those people had lived so many hours at that point that they just didn't care. They were just ready to watch the world burn.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you? Do you have an experience of like a show that just could not go right?
Oh, I mean, I have a number, and I feel like I've probably already said a few of them on the podcast, but the primary one, which is my supervillain origin story, was 9th grade in front of my freshman class.
You know what's funny? Okay, guess what Fargo North High is doing for their spring show?
Are they doing Clue?
They're doing Clue.
Are they doing? I'm guessing they're doing Clue the musical, though.
No, it's the straight play. Because they already did the musical. So they're doing Clue the play. And it's funny because I brought up to their tech director, I'm like, I believe the last time that Fargo North High did this show, my buddy pretty much got a concussion.
It was okay. So a couple of things to amend there. So we were still at Ben Franklin at that time because 9th grade at that time went through Ben Franklin. And then at North, you would start 10, 11, 12. So it was there, and it was in that old theater, which I know is still there, but it's been remodeled and stuff. So I have no idea what it even looks like anymore. And the script that we were using was not like a theatrical play script of Clue. Andrew took the script from the movie and just used that.
Oh boy.
And so we just made the movie, and we just cut some stuff that like couldn't, get in there or what have you. But that was it. Right. So this wasn't like, my guess is the Clue that they're going to be doing will be drastically different than what we did. And they'll have all sorts of safety precautions in place and stuff like that, because it won't be produced by kids. Right. I mean, that's what happened is our play was produced by kids. But yeah, I mean, that was my villain origin story, but also the demarcation point in a massive change in my personality, because it was the thing I was afraid of. Like I was so terrified of being, embarrassed in front of my class, like mates, right? Like in front of my school. That was the thing. Like if I'm up on stage and I get humiliated in front of them, I will die. Like I will not live again. And so when it finally happened and I reacted differently, I didn't react like I was going to just go away and never talk to anyone again. I kind of leaned into it and was like, yeah, you don't bother me. Right. And I kind of adopted kind of a fuck you attitude after that. But that one would have been the one that I always think of, where a door frame fell on my head, and it was really painful once I realized what had happened and I got off stage. But it was fine. I made it through it. The other one that I think of right away was actually when I was probably in the 4th grade. I'm pretty sure this was the first play I was ever a part of. And I was really excited to be a part of a play because I'd been going to the plays my dad had been directing, right? Like theater was in our family.
Yeah, watching all the big kids.
Right, exactly. And it looked fun, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to act, and I wanted to do all that stuff. And so this was a play at my mom's church. At the time, we were going to St. Mary's Catholic Church. And they told us all in Sunday school, hey, we're going to do a play for all of your parents of Bible stories. And I was like, oh, yes, we're going to do a play. That's amazing. And they're like, hey, we're going to hand out roles today. And then next Saturday, we will have rehearsal. And then Sunday, we will do the play for parents after church is done. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to be in a play. and I got cast as God behind the burning bush. And I got told by my friend Samantha Haypenny, whose mom I think was working on it, that I think what they're going to try to do with you is they may hook you up to like a rope and have you fly too, because you're God. And I was like, that's fucking amazing. I'm gonna fly as God. That's awesome. Like, I thought, this is it. This is the beginning. I'm gonna go act on stage. It's gonna be a huge deal, right? I thought this was the break. and so we do rehearsal where they hand out like all the scripts, and they also say, hey, Tucker, you're going to play God behind the burning bush, but we also need you to play one of the wise men. So now you're also playing a wise man. I was like, fuck yeah, I got 2 roles now. That's fantastic, right? And they said, well, with God, you're going to be behind this burning bush, right? And they had a big cardboard box that had leaves in different colors attached to it. So like green leaves and then orange leaves to be the flames, right? And they're like, you're going to be behind here with a microphone. I was like, oh, okay. But when you're a wise man, you'll do the wise man walk around the perimeter of the audience as they're journeying to see Christ. I was like, well, that's pretty awesome. I'm going to be out there and doing that. So we rehearse those things. It all goes fine. And then, so it's the next day, and we go through church, and I am so fucking amped to do this play. I cannot wait. I've been talking about it all night to my mom, like, oh my God, Mom, and we're going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I'm playing God, which must mean I'm a good actor, right? And all this stuff. And so we get there, and they say, hey, this one kid who was supposed to play, who's the guy who's going to get sacrificed by his dad? Is it Simon and Isaac?
Sure.
And
okay.
Then, well, you're a preacher, right? You fucking tell pastor shit.
I'm as much of a preacher as I am also Mr. Monopoly.
So whichever guy was like going to sacrifice his son for God, and then God stops him at the last minute.
Is it
I was going to play.
Abraham?
Maybe, I don't know. I was going to play the son who was going to get killed, and the kid who was supposed to do that got sick and couldn't be there, and so they had me jump in real quick for him, and I had to stay on script because I didn't know my lines for that one. I knew for God I was going to be reading off a script behind the burning bush, and for the wise men I didn't have any lines. So now I was like, well, I didn't memorize this because you'd have to see me saying it. So the first thing I suddenly did was I went on stage to do that scene, and it was a bit out of order. Like, there was no chronological order to these scenes. They just kind of threw a bunch together, because you'd think you might start with something like Adam and Eve or whatever, but there was nothing like that. It was just all over the map. So I'm up there, and I'm really embarrassed because I'm sitting there reading off of a script that's just sitting below me on the ground, and everyone can see me do it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is my debut as an actor. And already people are seeing that I didn't memorize, which means I must be unprofessional and I'm not a good actor and all that shit. Right? So already I'm like in 4th grade, and I'm super critical of myself, of how I'm doing and what's happening. I'm not being realistic about the scene at all. So that little segment ends. I go off stage, and I'm like, okay, well, that's done. Now what I'm prepared to do, I can do. And so it's time for the scene with the burning bush. And so my job, I'm off stage left with the burning bush, and I'm supposed to like someone like brings it on and sets it down. And then I'm supposed to sort of crawl from off stage left to get inside of it. So that's what I do. And then Mike Tidd is supposed to bring me the microphone after he has read like some scripture. And the microphone, it's not a wireless mic, it's a corded mic. And this was the mic that we had used the day before in rehearsals. So he's supposed to bring it over to me and hand me the microphone behind the burning bush. And then I'm supposed to read from the script back there. Well, so he goes to move to bring it to me. And he's on stage doing this, and he stops and he looks back and he starts tugging on the microphone. And I'm going, bring it to me, bring it to me. And he just out loud says, it's taped down. He just says it out loud. It's taped down, like probably half into the microphone. And so I look off stage past him, and I see this lady who was like directing, and she goes, move the bush. And so I move the burning bush towards the microphone, and the whole place erupts with laughter. And I am mortified because I think they are laughing at me. They're making fun of me. So I stop halfway. Like, I don't even get the burning bush all the way to him. And then I just lean out from behind the burning bush, not because I want them to see me, but because I was so mortified that they were laughing at the box moving that I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do this. So I read my lines from behind the burning bush and then gave him the mic back. And I just got up and walked off stage. That was my whole scene, right? So I'm like, 0 for 2, man. Oh my God. I'm all I have left is the Three Wise Men scene.
Yeah.
But I'm like, at least I don't have any lines. At least all we do is we just walk around the room. It's going to be embarrassing because everyone just saw me do the God in the Burning Bush and read the kid earlier. So now they get to watch me walk around them in a circle, but that's okay. All I'm doing is walking.
Interesting.
So we go, and I'm saying this room probably has like 40 to 50 people in it, right? Adults. Because there's a huge cast of kids. It's a Catholic church, so there's a million fucking people there, right?
Right. Yep.
And it's packed. And it's the middle of the day because we all had church, and then we're right. So it's just brightly lit. You know, it's not like a theater. It's just like we're all in a rec room doing this play on the raised dais. And so we go get our costumes on for the Three Wise Men, and they play. I forget which Christmas song it is for the Wise Men, but they play that, and we walk around the room. And as we're walking around the room, I am telling myself, oh my God, they're all making fun of me right now. Everyone in this audience, they watched me do that shit. And I felt humiliated as I was walking around the audience. So then what's supposed to happen is we finish the walk and we get back to the stage. And then there's like a curtain that's supposed to open up. And we're supposed to see Joseph and Mary and Jesus in the manger with like manger animals and stuff. Well, something was going on back behind the curtain that I couldn't see that was stopping it from happening. They weren't set up in time, and it was going to take them. They were like fixing something and it wasn't working yet. And so finally, the director lady looks behind the curtain and whispers to like one of the wise men, and he goes over to her and hears from her. And then he goes up to the microphone and turns the microphone on and goes, "We're going to do that again." And so they play the music again, and they make us walk around them and do the same thing we just did, but now everyone's laughing. I wanted to fucking die. And so we do that. By the time we walk around the second time, they've got the manger set up ready, and we finish the play. And then we're in the car on the ride home. And I just remember like going, "So what did you think of the play?" And I can't remember which parent, but one of them just went, "Yep," like that. And I thought, that's it. I'm done. I'll never act ever again. My career is over. And that anxiety pretty much stuck with me up until that fucking door frame hit me on the head during Clue.
Wow. Do you
Right?
still feel any of that anxiety, or have you gotten to the point now as a performer where you're like, I can shake off the things that might not go right and I don't concentrate?
Oh, as far as you have to accept that things are going to go wrong if you're going to do anything in live theater, right? It's not fun. You don't want it to, but it's part of it, right? So you have to adapt to it. And I had zero of those skills at that time. I was a kid. I was in the 4th grade, and we had one afternoon of rehearsal of Bible stories, right? So it wasn't like my expectations were super high for what I thought I was getting into through what it turned out to actually be. And so there are always anxieties about, am I actually good at this? Am I a fraud? I can't watch myself act, but I can go on stage and not worry about, well, what if this happens or that happens? Those things I actually don't worry about, because that mindset of not being afraid of the audience and their judgment is something I can get into in the moment that something goes wrong, right? I'm not in that mode when I'm doing it because I want them to like it and I want to know that they like it. But if something breaks, I don't go into a mode of, oh my God, now I'm humiliated. Now it's like, yep, that happens. I can, that's not a problem whatsoever. But at that time I thought this is the beginning of my, acting career, right? Because I was such a serious kid. And yeah. So I mean, it it definitely made me self-conscious about even trying to get up in front of people. And of course I still did. Like I did plays all through junior high school. And so I was able to kind of slowly gain that confidence back. But yeah, that stuck with me for a bit. It's really funny to think about now, but at the time it felt like life or death.
Interesting. Well, listen, I want to end it. Oh, I want to end it on that because I feel like we've really hit some interesting things that are making people think about their own, we all perform in one way or another, right? Even if you don't think you're like, oh, I'm not a performer. At one point you've given a presentation, you've had to speak in front of a group, anything. And so we all just need to have a little more grace when it comes to those people in front of us. I've seen Broadway shows that have had to stop so that they can reconfigure something and then go back into what's going on. And, that's just, it happens, right? We just all suspend disbelief. If it ruined a show for you because they had to stop because a microphone wasn't in place, then you're ruined. Now you're lucky that no one reviewed a Bible play, because could you imagine if someone like kept dropping clippings for the rest of your life where they're like, and the believability went out the window when the burning bush had to scoot across. I can't even tell you how much I would have given to watch that. I bet that was awesome. Like
it probably exists on video somewhere. I don't think I have a copy of it, but
we'll have to.
I remember seeing a video of it at some point, but I couldn't tell you if that was one that we had or not.
What I love about really old home videos too is when people talk. In fact, frequent guest Natalie Deutsch told me that she bought some people's home videos like from a thrift store. Like, so she's got, like the Thief River Falls band trip, 1988. And she's like, we got to do something amazing with these. And I'm like, yeah, let's start watching these things and let's figure out what the appropriate response is going to be, because there's nothing. It was like people didn't realize that you could hear behind the camera. So like in a lot of our home movies, it's like me opening Christmas presents, but you can hear my mom answering the phone and being like, no, she doesn't live here anymore. Okay, bye. And then hangs it up rather than just like taking the phone off the hook.
Those are like really interesting moments though.
They really are. They're the moments that really remind you like that's what life is really like, right?
Well,
life is not a perfect curated video.
Think about this. Someone was recording you with analog video and your mom answered a call on a landline. She didn't even know who it was calling at first. The phone rang and she picked it up.
Yeah, amen, man. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. At one point, I wanted to have a one-man show that was called Toilet, but it didn't go anywhere.